Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Sentient, written by Jabarthing. We were first made aware of Damsius 3, known by the inhabitants as Earth of Sol, during the 14th expedition of Namar Cordius into the Hegnar Po cluster. Since it was discovered by we the Varlants, we claimed the Damsius system and gave it the namesake of our illustrious leader, Damsius the Wise. Damsius 3 was intended to be a way station for our fleets as we expanded further into the cluster. I was assigned to the colony as a security alpha and was to begin preparing it for colonization. We'd known that the planet was currently held by self-labeled humans, though we could not understand them at the time and gave them the name of Otani, Softwalkers. However, many of our lower-level staff who dealt with them on a regular basis referred to them as Otabli, Soft Thralls. They were a simple, non-advanced species that we had dealt with in the past. Primitive technology and outdated social orders. I still stand firm by our decision to mark them as non-sentient due to the lack of extrasolar activity. I was ordered by my higher alpha to prepare a region for colonization and to ensure that the Otani did not interfere with the project. My first goal was to clear the site of obstacles. Otani have a penchant for use of solidified rock paste in their construction. They proved resistant to most of our demolition equipment. When we arrived, they seemed curious and afraid. Some approached us with what we later realized was enthusiasm, on the basis that we assumed that these species had no sense of self-preservation, a trait I still say holds true. We began the process of demolition of these structures and was satisfied that the Otani were sapient enough to flee from danger. As we ran behind schedule and the Otani began resisting our movements, I ordered that we use mining lasers from orbit to prepare our colonization site. Even after we landed, it only took an hour for the Otani to begin returning to their brooding sites. I realized that they had no concept of object permanency and had assumed that once they no longer saw us, that we had left. I felt exhausted after the first rotation of the planet. The Otani kept coming back. Some of them would use primitive weapons, but they were ineffectual against our environmental suits. Once the site was clear, we ran tests on the atmosphere and foliage to ensure that we would no longer be at risk. Workers arrived as scheduled, and the process of building the colony was underway. Otani nests popped up in the surrounding bush. I oversaw a security team as we investigated the nest. They had woven fabric over metal structures and had packed as many as they could into it. It was appalling how barbaric they lived. We needed to ensure that they didn't begin producing more rock hives like the ones we demolished earlier. We began with the larva. A researcher who insisted on joining us determined that their larva could produce a sonic frequency capable of temporarily reducing their minds to base fight or flight. As we attempted to dispose of the larva, the Otani rushed us with reckless abandon. They attacked with anything they had on hand, or even their own fleshy manipulators. It was tragic how aggressive the Otani were. We tried to be reasonable with how we dealt with the nests, but we were convinced now that the Otani were a lost cause, a violent and barbaric species incapable of base, rational thought. It was after this that I realized the scale of the Otani infestation that we were dealing with. I requested any reserve that could be brought on hand to help us with this horrible species. The Otani rely on rapid thermal exchange as their primary technological method. It makes sense, given their overall lack of any sentience, that they'd use such an inefficient and simple method. We began using mining lasers to reduce their major hives over the planet to ensure that when we colonized the area, we would not have to deal with an organized hive, and instead have simpler nests to deal with. Our priority was still the larva, though. our researcher had begun tests on Otani brooding methods and larvae. He was shocked to discover that two almost entirely different types of Otani were capable of brooding a single larva, and then less than a full rotation of the planet, they were capable of producing once again. Sometimes a single larva, or a clutch of two or more. Some of our guards discovered that the Otani were an excellent source of entertainment, and while I personally found this practice distasteful, it was hugely beneficial for morale. I was beginning to suspect that we'd found the secret to dealing with the Otani. That was, of course, before they gained sentience. The Otani, as it turned out, were unusually capable of using equipment that had been abandoned. Power cores were traditionally abandoned due to weight and practicality. They were spent of most of the energy and presented no obvious danger. The Otani, being so devoid of self-preservation instincts, would handle these cores with only barbaric rags and would even outright attack us to get power cores. We assumed, since they had an anomalous amount of cobalt in their atmosphere, that they relied on radiation to survive. The Otani had a unique but infuriating ritual around discarded power cores. They would rush forwards towards a patrol or a group of us and throw the core back at us. We at first believed that it was some form of worship and felt more than a little bit flattered. That is, until the faulty power core detonated and killed all of my security detail, but me. They continued using power cores in this manner until they learned how to use it in place of their traditional burning method of technology. I had realized too late what the Otani were. Despite their neglect of survival, in the face of the laughingly inept technology, they were somehow sentient. They could feel. They could think. Perhaps they were influenced by our own presence. Whatever the method of their development, it was uncanny. Their weapons, which at one time were nothing more than children's toys or novelties, had evolved. They were dangerous. Our colony had quickly been overrun by them. On my last day on that wretched planet during the Great Otani Raid, I saw it in their eyes. As a sentient to a sentient, we had all been blinded by arrogance. I saw anger in their eyes. We Varlants are passionate people, our poets and artists the foremost in the galaxy. Yet, when I looked into those eyes, it dawned on me why we could not understand them. When one stands on a planet, they cannot see the planet. Their passion, their inner fire, so bright as to leave everything else in darkness. What disgust I had for dealing with them was met 100-fold in hatred. They butchered us. To them we were nothing more than flesh. I abandoned my alphas and my subordinates in terror. I left them to the hands of the Otani. I plead of you, Higher Alpha. I beg for execution. Please spare me from the Otani. Final words of Indorus Kull, former Security Alpha of Damsius III, sentenced to death on the former colony in light of new Sentience Classification Act. End of story. Story number 2. We create our own demons, written by British Tea Company. It's funny, 5 years ago, you can't even remember the names humans gave their ships. Aurora, Bastion, Guardian, Protector. You look at them now, and you wonder, what changed? Eradicator, Perturbation, Ravager, Harrower. And I can tell you, they met two races. First, they met the Drath, and then we met the humans. Humans first picked up Drath communications in the year 2195, excited in naive eagerness about the prospect of other forms of intelligent life in the galaxy. A delegation was sent to the Drath homeworld to begin first contact protocols against their new friends. Not surprisingly, those delegates never returned. It's safe to say that the Drath probably found them delicious. It didn't take long before the Drath found the fledgling human civilization. billions of their people were lost in the coming months. As a newcomer to the galactic stage, humans were behind in technology and manpower. Before the year was out, every human colony, save for Mars and Earth herself, had been destroyed. Their populations either sent to harsh slave camps or cannibalized. It was a sorry chapter that got repeated time and time again. We were sick of it. Every species that lies behind us, and the Drath had never found the looming threat of those monsters, ancient and venerable as we so happened to be. The Drath could never hope to defeat us. But every species that weren't behind our protection, they were nothing but helpless against these barbarians, and it was time that we put a stop to it. We sent the humans our technology, told them that we were there to help. We came right in the nick of time too, because just as the Martian colony was evacuated, Earth had managed to create a planetary barrier which would be impenetrable to the best efforts of the Drath. The humans were saved. Maybe not in an ideal way, but at least their lives could continue. And continue they did. Trapped behind their bubble, the humans were safe to poke around with the shield that we had given them, in what had taken our race 1,000 years to deduce. The humans had figured out in just 2, after looking over at our gift with much attention. They found out the source of its power, and the means to recreate it. While the Drath never saw it coming, we had always kept a probe on Earth just to see what the humans would do behind their shield. They would not be idle, as the newfound source of energy boosted their economy. They dug deep into their world, mining every precious bit of mineral as they rebuilt their armies and geared for their return. In less than 3 years, humanity assembled a mighty starfleet, which would take other races entire generations to construct. When the shields finally fell, so did the Drath civilization. The first of the human ships, Eradicator, nameship of the Eradicator-class battleship, revealed itself as it opened fire with a diffusing null lance. A single beam of dark energy, split into many thousand prongs of energy, shattered the Drath invasion fleet. From Earth's surface, thousands of these black ships rose into space and set off straight for various Drath worlds. Their race was rendered extinct within days. We have rid the galaxy of the Drath. They have since disappeared into the void. Their worlds crumble underneath the bombardment of human armadas. In their stead, we have made another race. The human empire now carves out much of the fallen Drath territory and has expanded to 160% of the size of what the Drath used to be. No civilized races lie close to their borders, but as we've created this new monster, we must be prepared to what happens when ultimately this new predator finds itself bordering potential prey. End of story. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Estrella the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudigiol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Human Ships, written by Roaring Beard Dragon. Grandok swilled his optical organs to target the vessel in front of him. The slight noise of chitin grinding on chitin emitted as he did so. The ship in question was the Forge Father. The Forge Father was a human mining ship with built-in refineries to process gathered ore. Grandok had always found human ships strange. It was not that they were elegant or styled, or that they had too much. Rather, they had both style and elegance, while remaining totally practical with little exterior decoration. This ship in particular had no exterior decoration whatsoever. The Forge Father was a huge titanium rectangle, with huge mouth of tractor beam drills and mining lasers on the front. Human ships were some of the few in the galaxy with front and back, and a large array of thrusters and other propulsion devices on the back. On all other faces of the vehicle were various doors, hatches, and ramps for entering and exiting the craft, and I was about to enter. I was guided in by a human female with brown fur and skin. They spoke to me before we entered. "Hello, Inspector. My name is Sasha, and I'm here to take you to our captain." "So be it, human. Let us enter," I reluctantly said. Redaxians are capable of speaking most human tongues, so I do not need a translator. Besides, this smelled more natural. My legs clinked on the metal floor of the airlock through which we entered, as I attached the breathing aids necessary to survive in human-safe oxygen. With a faint hiss, the airlock finished its work, and we were released into the bare metal corridor with a ramp at the opposite end. Once we climbed the ramp, I was taken through several similar corridors to the bridge. "Greetings, Inspector," the human male spoke as I entered. He had hair of a similar color to Sol, the star of the human home system, and his skin was pink, though, to me and all other Vodoxians, it was the color of our home star, red. "Greetings, human. My name is Grundok. Today I shall carry out my duty and survey your ship, as is custom for a stay for 3 human souls or greater." I drawled professionally. "Please give me a tour." "Well," the human captain replied, "my name is Andrew, and first of all, this is a bridge, a center point where the majority controls are located." "Yes, I know that," I hissed. "On to the next room." Throughout my inspection, I became increasingly worried. It appeared human ships were most definitely not designed for safety above all else, like the ships of every other species. But that couldn't be correct, right? In the end, I expressed many doubts, not truly expecting a reply. But the reply simply made me worried. "Human, that's not a reactor. That's just a cleverly disguised bomb leaking power." "Oh yes, that's just a nuclear fission reactor. Don't worry about it." "But that's nothing like a fission reactor. It doesn't have the safety beams." "And human, you mean to say that these toxins and bioweapons are your food?" Yeah. Those are coffee and chili powder." Roughly 1 rucksack later, I had finished my inspection, after which I was taken to the bridge and asked my verdict. Though I allowed their stay, as they technically hadn't broken any rules, I immediately sent a message to Station Command asking for 1, me to never ever inspect a human ship again, and 2, for all humans to be placed in separate hangar to other species to avoid our imminent death. End of story. Story number 2. The Cold of the Void, written by Echoing Cascade. Death Welder. The word strikes fear into all who hear it. When humanity was discovered, almost every military in the known galaxy wanted them for their ground troops, and those who didn't started working on countermeasures. Captain Cirque was a Corsair, a legal pirate for his race, Tharis. The Tharis were the go-to mercenaries in most armed conflicts. They had, through extensive genetic manipulation, the ability to adapt to nearly any environment. Yet, the average human was sturdier, faster, and all-round a better soldier than Tharis could ever hope to be, to the point that an augmented human warrior was the equivalent of a light tank. He had been given the unenviable task to bring a live sample for study. The Tharis were not the first to try this. A gobble species had tried to kidnap humans with violent and messy results. They tried to capture them in groups or drug single individuals, mused Corsair Captain. Bad idea. They seem to forget why they are trying to get the subject, but I figured something they didn't. You don't actually need an adult. Cirque had come up with a simple and ingenious plan. Find a small vessel loaded with human hatchlings with no more than 1 or 2 adults. tracked a said vessel inside the cruiser's cargo hold and used the hatchlings as leverage to keep the adults in check until he can bring them all back to the testing facility. I can even kill the adults if things get out of hand. Foolproof. That had been his thinking 2 hours ago. Now he was hearing the screams of his crew on every channel through his communicator. What in the 5 hells is going on? There were no life signs other than the ones for the humans, and they were all here with me. He looked at the adult human female, who had been reassuring the hatchlings since their capture. What's going on? Who is doing this? The look she gave him made it pause. She looked at him with pity. Lady teacher, they don't know remorse or mercy, but I pray they kill you quick. He knew there was something he missed and something changed. Something horrible had happened. The screams had stopped. If I can make it to the escape pod, I may have a chance. He thought of taking one of the crying hatchlings with him, but something told him that it would not be wise. As he left the human vessel, he was met with total darkness inside the cargo hold. He thought of using his portable light, and then he felt something squishy at the front. Something familiar. Something that should be alive. I can make my way to the escape pods in total darkness. The ship has been my home for many, many rotations. With some luck, whatever did this can't see in the dark. That's a bet that you would lose. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at the same time. Siak froze. He hadn't said a word. The only reason that you still in one piece is the fact that you didn't take a kid with you. What do you want? Go to your ship's bridge and release our vessel back to space unharmed. How would you get it back if you're not inside your vessel? The creature in the darkness responded with an audible smile. I am inside the ship. Siak made slow progress to the bridge. He wouldn't dare to turn on the lights, even after he almost slipped on what could only be the blood of his men. He could feel something huge move around him, something larger than what the room he was in should be able to contain. It would take a while to get the bridge in these conditions, and eventually fear made place to curiosity. What are you? We have had many names, imaginary friends, recurring dreams, guardian angels. Siak felt hot breath by his side. He slowly turned, unable to breathe or close his eyes. He didn't see the thing per se, only saw 2 red eyes, larger than he was tall, and row after row of fangs, aligned to form a cruel smile. Bits and pieces of his crew still stuck here and there, but we prefer nightmares. Siak couldn't look away. It took everything he had to keep from fainting, and his next words nearly cost him a heart attack. That's can't real. The creature closed its eyes and seemingly disappeared. Siak could breathe again and fell down. He promptly vomited the contents of his stomach. We didn't always take form like this. Back when humans were religious, fearful, and ignorant, did we manage to take shape here and there. Not everyone who walked in the dark made it back alive. Siak could feel the creature smile. He was trying to get up, but his legs refused. The creature sighed. Then they got into science. The fear diminished, and with that our power waned. Siak felt a hand the size of a shuttle gently grip him and lift him to his feet. But one day they made it to the stars, and the endless void brought back fear. A fear that was born long ago, when the first primate mistook a shadow for a predator out to kill it. The fear of the dark. Siak began to walk again. He could barely hear the creature over his own heart pounding at his chest. We could take form again. We prepared to feast of human flesh. And yet, Siak had made it to the stairs that would bring him to the bridge. he heard a large amount of what he didn't want to identify be shuffled out of his way. We didn't want to return to being nothing more than ideas after we had our fill, so we struck a bargain. We each protect a child until they come of age, and they don't try and find a way to get rid of us. Cirque was now in front of the bridge door. It opened automatically, and the lights turned on. To his shock and relief, it was immaculate, as ever. We still get our full, but just not human meat. Cirque shuddered and started the procedure to free the human vessel, and then he stopped. Will you let me live if I do this? Of course, I won't lay a finger on you. Cirque had no real choice, and he let the ship out of his cargo bay. He didn't hear so much as felt goodbye from the creature. He sighed and prepared a course for Theris territory. But then the lights went off. The last thought that went through his head before fangs, claws, hands, and tentacles tore the flesh off his bones was, he said they each protect a hatchling, and the ship had 6 of them. End of story. This is a special thank you to the one, the only, the legendary Eric Hino, who has become the only Tier 6 patron. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Australia the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudic Yol, Meridian 117, Elysia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. Shady Humans, written by British Tea Company. Most people are surprised when I tell them the most powerful group within the entire Union sits on Earth. They're always so surprised about how some random planet in the middle of nowhere could possibly be so powerful in terms of political power. To date, Earth has had membership within the Union for at least 500 years, but has not once, ever, had anyone born from that world fulfill any important role within the Union. Never once has there been an example of a human serving any important political office, and chances are there never will be. It seems strange that I am calling humans the most powerful demography within the Union. There is no history of them having any power or movement on record, and we know quite well that humans are simply referred to as those people when they're brought up. Hardly anyone can even remember what a human probably is. That is the terrible thing about modern society. What if I told you that humans were the most powerful demography? What if I told you that in truth they also hold the most political power out of any race in the Union? You won't believe me. Well, what if I told you that all the banks within the Union are owned by humans? Go on, look it up, see? All the banks within the Union are owned by humans. Does it surprise you if I say that banking was a system that humans introduced? It doesn't. Good. Let's make it very clear right now that if there's one thing that humans are good at, it's finance. To date, 10 out of the last 13 economic booms since the last 500 years were as a direct result of the banks which the humans had set up. Roughly 4 economic recessions have been averted solely because of the systems which the humans had set up. Now, it doesn't end there. What have I told you now that out of the top 100 businesses within the Union, 83 of them are owned by humans? And out of the 17 that aren't owned by humans, 13 of them have the majority of the shareholders being human. Good. You believe me now. Now then, here's a final thing. The average human within the entire Union occupies the top 0.1% of the galaxy. On average, your regular human is above the age of 30 will gross at least 4.6 million credits per year. The average income of a human at the age of 18 ranges from 185,000 credits to 300,000 credits. How? They are goddamn people responsible for most of the things that we know as modern finance. Stocks, the humans made that. Banks, the humans made that. Bonds, the humans made that too. 99% of the tax policies and politicians are making, probably drafted by some human pencil pusher. If there's one thing the humans are good at, it's making money. Money is how everything works. It's how politics work. And by extension, money means power. The humans are the ones who sponsor politicians. They don't get into cesspool themselves. Why do you think everyone who runs for any position always takes a trip to Earth first? They want to get into the pockets of the big businessmen so that they can get campaign donations. Of course, you know how that works. Scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours. Yes, good observation. The humans, in fact, do own the majority of politicians. There are few who go against them, of course, but, as you know, the humans always get their due in the end, one way or another. Some people have tried to screw over the humans in the past. How did it end for them? Well, the humans don't use the law to uphold something that was done under the table, and they certainly don't break it either. The most powerful race is certainly above petty murders. They got a better way. They make enemies with them. They finance your enemies. They steal your supporters, your funding, probably even the clothes you wear. All stolen the legal way. They are above most shady organizations in the sense that you won't cut off your fingers for not doing the favor you owe. They prefer ruining you instead. End of story. Story number 2. Missing, written by Terracron. We've got another one, Doc. The exasperated attendant wheezed. His skills fluttered in a hypnotic pattern, possibly in an attempt to catch her attention. But Hislant was determined to finish her report first, and ignored him. It wasn't until he started to turn green that she felt pity on him. There are plenty of surgical staff on call, Dremel. Why do you keep coming to me? Her front started to gain color. She wasn't really able to control it, but it should be clear sign to the young being that she was not amused anyway. He wheezed, Well, you have the most experience with them, ma'am. The rest of the staff are scared witless. His wheezing just didn't end, and she was scared that he was going to have a fit. Her pity for the now almost vibrating youngster got the better of her. I'll go and see. The look of relief on his face was almost worth the oncoming anxiety. She made her way down the lightly colored halls, appreciating the cool air. She worked in several hospitals around the system, and this was the only one with an atmosphere that she could stomach. The pastel decor was a universal constant, however. It's something you learn to live with, she considered. Somewhere in the distance a pulse monitor yelped aggressively. Something beeped. All things considered, this was a good place to work. Would have been great if it wasn't for the proximity to the new space base Disappointment DA-9. It was huge, it was close by, and it was stuffed to the brim with humans. Apparently, the base was a retreat for apes returning from several wars, and almost all of them came to her hospital first. Nyland was freaked out by the humans. Her fronds fluttered with color, and she took a deep breath. It had been months since her first encounter with a human with the prosthesis, and she still shuddered to think of it. What's worse is that people started to look to her as the resident human expert. Apparently, they'd all given her incredibly praising reviews, saying that she was professional and frankly adorable. Flattering, maybe. Annoying, definitely. She found her way to the clinic, and her first human of the day, sitting on the examination table, was a familiar face. Teeth bared in a now familiar form of greeting amongst humans. She returned it the best she could, until she noticed his arm. Since she'd had to break the news to him, Simon Grant had indeed been able to strip his arm to expertly molded prosthetic skin. Apparently he'd also managed to lose it above the elbow. Most disconcertingly, he was waving the remaining stump. She couldn't find the words. Hey, Doc, it's been a while since I've been here. Hesland looked down at her pad and up at him again. trying to fit the remainder of the arm inside her blind spot.
If I'm wrong about this, it'll sound like I'm being a bit racist, but weren't you the attending last time, too?
She nodded and swallowed. Yes, I was. I was. She went through a violent purple. What seems to be the problem? She forced out, trying not to look at the metal sticking out of the human shoulder.
I lost me arm,
he said with a smile. It finally dawned on her. The human must have snapped. The idea of a prosthesis becoming too much for him. He promptly ripped it off himself. She needed to handle this delicately.
You were in a fight. We did what we could to fix you. No, Doc. I mean, I lost my arm.
She looked at him, nonplussed.
I took it off last night, and now I can't find it.
What?
I've been drinking last night, a couple of beers. The squad thought it would be funny if I took off my arm, and now I can't find it. Your squad, you?
She tried to breathe, felt hyperventilation was just around the corner, and a nervous laugh escaped her throat.
Where do you think it is?
She managed to squeeze out. He looked sheepishly at the anatomical posters on the wall.
I may have thrown it out the airlock on the dare.
She tried to stifle the hysterical giggle that was forming. She really did, but it escaped nevertheless. Simon looked at her with a confused frown until he realized that she'd laughed and joined her.
Well, have you fitted with another one, Mr. Simon Grant? Could you make the next one red? Make it look like I'm going faster.
Still trying to stop laughing, Hisland made her way to the door. Once outside, she leaned against it and controlled her breathing. She shook her head. So weird. And laughed. End of story. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnolds, Australia the Dreamer, Trygan95, Pudic Yol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksborn, Angry Marine, Albard and Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. 4 Invasions and a Wedding, written by August the Cat. When I was 8, my world was invaded. They came without warning in great black ships that dwarfed the pitiable transports that my people had made to ferry us between our home and our only colony further out in our own system. We had never seen such power, such brutal technology. We had dared to hope that we were not alone, but this was beyond anything that we were ready for, and we knew it. It was a small mercy that they didn't open fire upon our cities, as some of our darkest stories assumed that they would. Instead, they broadcast an ultimatum, informed us that they expected their demands to be obeyed to the letter, and then sent a series of preliminary orders. Governments and corporations toppled, daily life became chaotic, and by the time the ground troops started landing in their flat, boxy craft, revealing flat, boxy soldiers in flat, boxy armor, we were prepared to give anything just to pretend life could go back to normal. They made slaves of us, in a way, giving us just enough hope for a better life that we would work ourselves to death under the new system. We were bent to one whip of mining, drilling, harvesting, but also technical skills, data entry, code testing, market research. We learned things that we wouldn't have known for decades. We improved our technology as best we could while still meeting our species-wide quotas. They took what they wanted, and eventually the thrill of invasion wore off. Skirmishes had happened at first, but then they simply died away as people gave up or saw that we were only slightly worse off than under our own corrupt politicians. The invaders similarly lost interest, pulling back to their ships and just collecting the tribute every so often, like bored gods. When I was 15, hardened from the mines, we were invaded for a second time. They came in sleek ships of gleaming metal, sensors, and broadcast arrays, turning them into gleaming pincushions of communication. We'd never seen such refinement, such purity of design. We knew that we were not alone, but we still were trapped, and this new species came to us as potential saviors. Of course, we should have known that wouldn't be the case.
They struck a deal with the invaders to use our world as a comm relay for their great network. We would be forbidden to use the broadcast technologies, for fear of interfering with the great machines that they planted out in the oceans. Their technicians came down in shining silver needles to show off their shining metal bodies as they built their monuments. They took slaves as well, engineers and programmers and guards and even simple couriers. They were well treated, fed and paid as much as could be spared, but they were still slaves. The things they learned put them so far ahead of the rest of us that even those simple servitors would be gods to us. But some came back and started teaching, while we were huddled in our old cities at night. Eventually, the new invaders finished their work and, leaving a few token ships in orbit to bombard anyone who broke the broadcasting rule, they left. We had access to the network now, but it was a culture so alien that it threatened to destroy us as much as any missile from the sky. But we held together. Old stories kept passed on by word of mouth, and we hoped for a day that we could reclaim our world. Hope is a dangerous thing. When I was 26, mindful of alien words, we were invaded a third time. We were hardly surprised anymore. We knew now that there was a greater universe out there, teeming with life. We just wished that we would ever have gotten to know it on our own, instead of seeing the massive globular ships that drifted into our system. We had never seen such nightmares, such monsters as these. They too struck a deal with the first invaders, but the tribute they demanded was not one of hands or minds, but of flesh. Black, boxy soldiers next to twisted, unarmed growths shuttled down to our world day after day, stealing away people seemingly at random. They vanished from our lives. We could not bear to think what they were used for. Food, pleasure slaves, something worse. Of course, it was something worse, as I found out when I was one of the ones grabbed one night. When the cost of keeping us in their experiments became too great, those taken were returned, myself amongst them. We had been first poked and prodded, then divided up. Then a group had various compounds injected into our skin. Over the course of months, we changed, flesh warping into patterns that couldn't quite understand. Some went mad, but the rest of us kept alert. Through the pain of the changes, when we weren't under observation, we watched. We asked seemingly innocent questions. We stole glances at their monsters. We listened. We learned. We came to understand that we were being made into new forms for use as world shapers in the service of these third invaders. Our group was declared a failure, though, and so, flesh drooping from missized bones, we were sent back. Their ships left, leaving only a few behind to monitor their experiments and contact new ones on stable populations. Before the century was over, it was said our people's original form would be gone, lost to the tides of history. At the age of 33, broken from minds, poisoned by a network, warped by a serum, my world, my home, was invaded for the fourth time. They came in 1,000 ships in many styles, then some were the size of the first invaders' warships, bristling with firepower that could destroy a world. Some were spiked with communications gear and warp field projectors. Some were plated in living armor, some were sleek, some bulky, some shone like stars, some were blacker than the void itself. Some were all of these things at once. We waited in our decaying cities and broken homes to see the new injustice that would be dealt us, trapped in our own gravity well, watching the sky through makeshift telescopes. I was one of the ones watching, and so I was one of the lucky few who got to see a flat box of Dreadnought ripped into pieces by a volley of weapons fire that showed itself as sparkling dots through my scope. I was privileged to witness one of those bristling needle ships smashed by plasma fire and burned brighter than their ships would have ever shone. I was allowed the distinct honor of witnessing the bulbous nightmare burst like a bubble under the combined might of a dozen different aggressors. I was one of the ones that saw the first landers come down and ran out to meet them. Fear had left me years ago, along with hope and pride and faith in justice. But now, all of those came rushing back as I dashed through the streets to meet our new occupiers. I would serve them willingly for what they had done. I would throw myself at their feet and bow and scrape in payment for the vengeance that they had brought my people, brought me. What would they look like? What would they demand? It didn't matter. All that matters was that they couldn't be like the others. I reached the landing point. A few others were already there, but most were still hiding in the buildings. They, too, had given up long ago. And they hadn't all seen the new way of things as I had. I watched as the lander opened, and a number of small beings swarmed out. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. White suits with simple red cross on the arm. 2 of them spotted me and headed my way, pointing. They carried cases. So many of them were carrying things, bringing more and more out of the lander. Weapons, tools. One of them reached me, and in perfect language asked, "Are you wounded?" I couldn't speak. I was confused, stunned. They spoke like us. They wanted to know if I was hurt. Did they only want the healthy? "I can still work," I rasped out, twisted tongue slapping against split lips. The 2 looked at each other. One of them retracted their helmet as they turned back to look at me. A mess of brown hair over pale skin stared down at me with a look that I've come to universally recognize as pity. "No. Are you injured? We won't hurt you. We're here to help." "We're here to help." I laughed. I laughed and kept laughing until my damaged lungs gave out, and I collapsed. I heard the medics shout over me, felt rough-suited hands on skin that long ago ceased to feel properly, and then I was unconscious. When I was 33, I met my first human. When I was 36, my body had been restored through medical technology that would have cost our planet its entire treasury, if they hadn't simply given it to us for free. When I was 42, I moved back to my hometown, finished with my second tour of the human armada, repaying my saviors by joining their campaign of liberation against an angry galaxy. By the time I was 44, I'd helped rebuild the old city library with the help of some of my new neighbors, who were kind enough to have brought some of their people's books to contribute to the whole. By 45, I had devoured the stories they brought and gone in search of more. At 47, I finished co-writing a book with a longtime friend that I'd met a decade and a half prior. At 48, that friend and I were more than just friends. 56 and our adopted children were growing up together with our new kids in our neighborhood. 59, and we had a pet dog imported from Earth. 60, and I finally convinced her to let us get a pet bell as well. Another decade since then of memories, dreams, family, friends, and advancement. My neighbors are now from 4 species. My friends are from a dozen more. Our world is rebuilt, better than ever, with the help of our galactic friends. I've traveled so much farther than I ever imagined, and seen so many wonders, but all of them come up short compared to the simple pleasure of knowing who's waiting for me at home. The first human I ever met was a headstrong medic who visited the first Lorani she'd ever met in the makeshift hospital that they'd set up every day until he agreed to stop being such a groveling, rambling fool. 37 years have passed since then, and I still haven't totally given up on the rambling part. Happy Liberation Day, my friends. And to you, honey, happy anniversary. End of story. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnolds, Australia the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudig Yol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Story number 1. We are immortal, written by The whole galaxy has known about quantum mechanics for longer than most species have existed. It was the fundamentals for computing far and wide, after all. No one questioned anything about it. Why would they? It was science, and a very set-in-stone one at that. There seemingly wasn't any room for philosophy. Then we met some goddamn maniacal monkeys who were going through an existential crisis from the moment they could properly think till death. The human, short, strong, friendly, blah, blah, blah. You've heard it 1,000,000 times. Now, as most know, the humans are very good at things that the mind can grasp, often outperforming their peers marginally. On the contrary, things that they suck at, they really suck at. And you guessed it, quantum mechanics is one of those things. Don't get me wrong, they try their absolute best to understand it, and they can memorize how things work. But understanding a subject and grasping it are two different things. As such, when we found them all those moons ago, we were the ones who helped them in that field. At the time, it was all pretty formal. It was as much information sharing as diplomatic meetings. But as both parties settled into their status quo, many, myself included, started making lifelong friends with our new colleagues. I was well acquainted with a man called Jean-Pierre, and would spend many nights having drinks in his office after hours. It was on one of those nights that this conversation happened. A conversation that would forever change me. I don't recall what I said, but I said that he would die from something that he claimed he did. Back before we learned to not question them too much. He was quite red at this point and laughed, saying, "Oh, Ma, don't worry, we're all immortal anyway." He was quite drunk, so I thought he was making things up. But I was drunk too, so I called his bluff. I thought he was referring to his biology, till he clarified and said that he was referring to quantum immortality. I asked him what he meant. I am quite a well-read researcher, but have never come across such a theory. He looked at me puzzled, and then realized, don't worry, it's a pretty controversial theory, so my guess is that we're just wrong. That must have explained it, but curious anyway, I asked him to elaborate for shits and giggles, and he obliged. What he proceeded to explain to me has haunted me for the rest of my life. The theory itself is quite simple and follows two principles that are accepted. First, all information on a quantum scale cannot be destroyed, with exceptions to black holes. Second, the superposition of particles means that every time that they are observed, time splits in two. One where each state is observed. Simple enough, so far. Building on these principles, we must assume that consciousness is a thing in the universe, as we still do not exactly know what consciousness is to this day. We can only assume it is. That last statement is also where this controversy lies, as if it does not prove to be a quantifiable thing. For the lack of a better term, then the theory falls apart. But I assume most people can agree sentience should be quantifiable in some way. However, for any individual, only their own sentience can be agreed to exist, as there is no way of confirming the consciousness of another. So, if the information of the conscious mind exists, then it cannot cease to exist. But people die, I hear you ask, and I hear myself ask in the past. But from your perspective, only you are conscious, so the theory postulates that from your point of view, as a sentient entity, you will never die. Or at least, your consciousness will never cease to exist for you. Because the moment you die, superposition tells us that there will be a split, one where you are dead and one where you are not. And as you cannot not exist from your point of view, you go on living forever. In other people's point of view, you might have died, but not yours. Awesome, right? immortality for all of us. Except it isn't. But the humans, as I said, live in constant existential dread. And so, I was told the true horror of the theory. A theory that is just as likely as any other that is untestable. He looked at me with a heavy look and asked me a rhetorical question. So, what happens when you die? I knew what he meant. Not getting killed, but dying of old age. I've come up with 2 answers so far. Firstly, that your universe simply ceases to exist. Every other might still exist, but the one you experienced, worked so hard on, will vanish. Very sad to think about, and Pierre agreed. However, even more scary for this human, it seemed, was the alternative. Infinite life. Once your body rots away, your conscience gets swallowed up into the universe, where you drift between the stars. To me, it sounded nice and peaceful. I did not understand why he didn't prefer this option in his hypothetical. The idea that we cannot die, that we are doomed to be bound to this plane for all eternity till the eventual heat death of the universe, that is a concept worse than hell to me. An infinite limbo of stagnation while awake. He looked out of the window overlooking Earth's moon. I love existing. However, if there is no end, then what's the point? Might as well just be a rock. You would end up the same. I didn't know how to retort, because it was true. We are not simply specks of dust in a universe because we lived and died, not simply existed. And then I realized something very important. You might be wondering why you are still reading this, future ambassador. Well, it's simple. Here on my deathbed, after being an ambassador to Earth for the better part of a century, I am afraid. I'm afraid of what is to come. For the humans have rubbed off on me, and they will rub off on you. And maybe, one day in the future, you too will truly be afraid of what is to come. But like me, you'll be more afraid of something else. I am more afraid of losing the humans. For whatever I might feel now, I know humanity had to deal with this alone for so long now. We are an old race. We know how to heal ourselves very well. But the human mind seems hardwired to fail. I'm writing this as a plea to help them, to tear their gaze away from the void, to show them the wonders of the universe, to be a friend. And as a friend of theirs, I can only ask you one thing. Please give them a hug. Space is very cold, and they have been alone for a long, long time. End of story. Story number 2. What they brought with them. Written by Brenther. To the honored members of the Trade Council, every species has something that sets them apart. The Kantari came with minds like organic calculators, able to process massive quantities of data in short order. This also made them the galaxy's go-to accountants. Banks and firms springing up and resulting in a founding of the centralized galactic currency. Even in modern times, only a supercomputer can match an individual Kantari accountant. The Malar are master craftsmen, their limbs capable of unparalleled precision in the construction of void ships and industrial equipment. The galaxy is widespread on so many worlds thanks to the expansion afforded by them. I could go on about the many other races, but that is not why I've chosen to appear before the Commission. These 2 examples provide pretext for the reason for being here. That is, the human menace. Humanity became a part of the galactic community in a gentle and simple manner. Following a brief quarantine period, their people were permitted to travel to new worlds. Humanity's unusual adaptability was the first trait researchers discussed as their unique contribution to civilized society. A race that could colonize and industrialize otherwise undesirable worlds could go far. Oh, how they were wrong. Humanity was not just adaptive, they were creative in every aspect of living. Commodities and useless goods they refer to as entertainment flooded the galactic market. The overuse of even their virtual entertainment devices is considered a clinical mental health issue. When humanity ascended, they brought their best and brightest. It's just that they also brought their worst habits to the galactic community. Recreational use of medical drugs, virtual environments designed to escape reality, dooming an individual to never desire to return to a productive citizen. And the worst of it all, bars. Establishments specifically designed to deliver poisons to those who wish to partake. Species of all kinds come to these places, flock to them on every colonized world, and even most stations, to socialize and drink unfettered. They come to ruin their lives by drinking copious amounts of poison, and completely disrupt the productivity of a people. Even humanity has a term for regulars that frequent this place. Alcoholics. This cannot be allowed. It is thus I propose the closure and legalization of all human-manufactured intoxicants and these toys before our economy crumbles under the weight of their toxic and addictive influence and drain on our economic growth. Thank you for your time. Lix Mariban, Senior Commission Board Member, former. End of story.
I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Estrella the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudigiol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy.
Story number 1. Eat or Be Eaten, written by British Tea Company. There was a pair of hungry eyes that stalked the Terran pack through the stinging cold. Bestial and ravenous the creature may be, it was nothing if not cunning. It was the apex predator of this world, the legendary creature where the natives reviled as a monstrous hellspawn. Weighing several tons and fully fleshed with sharp claws, massive fangs, and layers of hardy flesh and sinew, the beast was physically apt as it was intelligent. It had bided its time well. The fauna of this frozen planet was unforgiving. Savage felines, chomping lizards, and even aggressive herbivores existed in almost every nook and cranny. The Terrans were tough, but not so tough. Though they had slaughtered many predators, the hunt only made them weak. They had no natural shells to protect themselves with, only fashioned ones, which now were cracked and damaged. Their claws and teeth were only a few inches thick, and it didn't even belong to them. Their most fearsome aspect, those hunks of metal which spewed fire and smoke, were now no longer operational, burned out after prolonged use. The Terran pack had numbers, something that should be a non-factor. There were many packs on this world. Many of them could hardly challenge the beast. It took its time once more as the Terrans entered the deep forest. At the open plains, they would see it coming. Here, in its own home, where the thick foliage and falling snow made visibility difficult, it would not be caught so easily. The Terrans were stopping now. Where fire and flame would have dispelled many lesser creatures, the beast knew better than to fear the light and heat. As the Terrans sat around the campfire, squawking and communicating together, it was then that the beast knew that this was the opportune time to strike. The pack leader had sat himself at a vulnerable position. His highly decorated shell of fur made his status obvious. Whereas the beast would normally be cautious about attacking most pack leaders, It wasn't so hesitant when it saw this leader and his less than dazzling stature. Lunging out from its hiding spot and charging with all of its hunger and bloodlust, the beast bolted towards the Terran pack. It weighed several tons compared to the most measly few hundred pounds of these apes. Jumping high, it lunged straight at the pack leader. The pack leader was fast, but only fast enough to save himself from being flattened by the beast's weight. Snarling, saliva dripping, the beast hissed and roared at the pack leader, who took out his claw. Unlike the rest of his pack, his claw was several feet long. The beast pranced around, carefully checking its flanks as the Terran pack leader stepped to the other side of the fire and faced away from the beast. His pack was nervous now, waving their claws at him. If he attacked now, they would break. Then he could hunt the rest of them at his own leisure. Leaping over the flames, the beast lunged again at the pack leader. Instead of freezing or even fleeing in fear, the pack leader rushed straight at the beast. For a split second, the beast was confused, until it realized that the rest of the pack was rushing at him as well. As his claws came to slice the pack leader in two, it felt several thunderbolts of pain strike at its side and flanks. The Terran pack sank their claws into his body, each and every one of them being a painful flesh wound. The Terran pack leader swung his own big claw right at the beast's paw, severing the limb entirely. Even on only threes, the beast was dangerous. Rolling over, it would have flattened two of the Terran pack members if they weren't so quick. It struggled to stand up again as it roared, spat, and clawed, but it was no use. Some of the bolder Terrans continued to cut at it with their claws. In the distance, the Terran pack leader ripped off a tree branch and began to shape it with his claw, sticking it in the fire, and the leader plunged the flaming stick into the beast's face. Roaring and wailing with pain, the beast's single paw lashed out. It nicked the pack leader's chest just a little bit, leaving trickles of blood. But this only made the leader more determined. He stamped forward, driving the flaming stave into the beast's face even harder, until he quite literally poked one of its eyes out. The bigger Terran of the pack got up and the beast's back and placed a boot on its head, stomping once, twice, thrice, and a few dozen times. The beast's teeth came falling out, one by one, its one tongue pierced by its fangs. All the while, its paws and flank were harried by the stinging claws of the other Terrans. Blinded and numbed with pain, the beast gave an animalistic groan. It felt several paws touch its underbelly. Horror struck it as it felt 24 hands and a dozen voices grunt and flip it over. Its underbelly, unguarded by any muscle or thick fur, was now wide open. "You're hungry, boy, aren't you?" Sergeant Dusk asked the animal as he circled his prey. His squad, unkempt as they were from the countless animal attacks, still had a fire in their eyes. Everyone was tired. Most of all, they were hungry. "Eat or be eaten, I get that. It's how the queen bitch of nature works. Eat or be eaten. Thing is, boy, you ain't no predator here. We are. My bare-assed half-gorilla ancestors were busy poking mammoths to death while you were still fish with legs. You think you're dangerous with your claws and teeth. I got two things. My crew, and just how damned hungry I am right now." The beast continued to gasp and yell in agony as the Terrans surrounded it, knives coming out to prepare the death blows. "Cut this thing open. We'll need the fur. Make a bigger fire, boys. It's been 36 hours, and right now, we all want to eat." End of story. Story number 2. It Never Gets Old, written by Old Phil. This human specimen was quite interesting. The high scientists thought as their ship exited the atmosphere of the planet the locals called Earth. It was clearly dying, which was odd. no race in the galaxy has ever had anything or anyone die. This one appeared to be dying simply from getting old. But that's impossible, the high scientist thought. It never gets old, as the saying goes. Testing this dying creature his crew had kidnapped from the Earth world, it was clear the being's cells were forgetting how to regenerate, like a star running out of fuel. An unthinkable and amazing discovery that beings actually die. The high scientist decided to try and infuse a small reprogramming nanovirus to the DNA, so the cells would always replicate and replace any damaged ones. The creature immediately showed signs of improvement. The attempt was regrettably completely successful. He awoke in a strange room, feeling better than he'd felt in 40 years. It only took a moment for him to realize he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by strange alien creatures. Without hesitation, he reached out to the first one with a deadly punch. The double wet spat sounds echoed in the chamber as his fist hit the creature, and the creature hit the wall and stood down, dead. The other creatures all tried talking at once, but he couldn't understand them. He only knew that he had been taken by aliens, and it was time for payback. He jumped off the table, a roundhouse kick taking off one of the creature's heads, and jumping a sidekick, sending another through the wall, basically red mist. The last creature left dived for the button and hit it just before it was crushed by a devastating axe kick that left the massive dent in the floor and a rather large wet spot. The button beeped a few times ominously before a massive robotic arm blasted through the wall. Even bigger than our unknown protagonist, 4 of the robot's 10 arms grabbed his 4 limbs and held them in place, straining against the mighty man struggling against it. The robot leaned in and asked, "What is your designation, human earthling, so that I may record whom I killed?" The human glared into the robot's face and squinted. Another fist shot out suddenly behind the man's beard and punched the robot in the face, making it let go of him. The beard fist grabbed the robot by the neck before snapping the head off. The human said, "I am Chuck Norris." I heard that he then kicked the robot so hard that all the robot could do was grab his foot and drag Chuck Norris out of the spaceship, with him crashing through the walls, eventually crashing back to Earth. And Chuck Norris stepped out of the wreckage wearing a new cowboy hat that he'd made from the robot's head. The camp counselor glared at the young Mitox and said, "Am I telling the story, or are you?" Mitox looked sheepishly at the camp counselor. Him and the other boys are out there, staying out in the spooky woods of their forest planet tonight, camping. It's scary there, but their parents insisted that scare camp was a fun time. The scary ghost stories are the best in the universe. The camp counselor glared around the campfire at the young boys' tracks and asked, "Anyone else want to chime in with some Chuck Norris facts?" One small boy raised his hand. The camp counselor said, "By all means, let's hear what you know." I heard that Chuck Norris once stopped a volcano erupting by kissing it on the cheek," the little boy said quietly. "Ha!" Another boy said, "I heard he once punched a Zolfron destroyer ship, and it instantly fused into a micro-black hole and evaporated within a planked second." "Oh yeah? Well, I heard that he once saved an Earth from the Quatan invasion fleet by punching space-time so hard and fast that he created a wormhole that sucked the whole fleet in and dropped them into the galactic supermassive black hole," another boy said, grinning. And I heard that Chuck Norris could eat just one Lay's potato chip." All the boys in the camp counselor stared slack-jawed at the youngest boy, who just said that. Then they all laughed and laughed. "Oh, Yuxty, that was funny," the camp counselor said between fits of laughter. "Everyone knows that's impossible." After a few minutes, the laughter died down, and in the ensuing silence, a sound was heard. The sound of a single potato chip being eaten in the distance, echoing off the mountains like a sound of a million drum sets being stepped on by a giant. The boys all snapped their multitude of differently shaped eyes towards the camp counselor, who looked around in sheer terror and said, that's enough Chuck Norris stories. Maybe we should all get some sleep now. After the boys left, the camp counselor tendered his resignation and retired. No one has heard from him since. It never gets old. End of story.
I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Australia the Dreamer, Trygain95, Fudic Yol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy.
Steve and Daisy, written by Upgrade. Councillor Brax, we have finished the signal analysis of the destruction of the suppression field around the Terran homeworld, chittered Science Officer Chuxel. Good, said Brax, his voice peaked. The fleet admirals need to know how the humans managed to take out an orbital platform without electricity. T-minus 5 minutes to launch, yelled the operator, his voice nearly unintelligible through the long pipe that connected the local launch coordinates to the capsule. Gyro spin-up lines pressurized. Colonel Steve Brockton reached above his head and opened up a small brass valve. Compressed air hissed through the lines, and several of the pitch and heading indicators spluttered madly for a moment. And carved lettering 0, 90, 180, and 270. Nearly perfect, with only a slight scratch inside the 8, betraying the fact that the device had been created entirely by hand. Since the Chimmer had decided to isolate, trap humanity by ruining electricity planet-wide, everything was handmade. Steve tapped the steam pressure gauge, steady at 3,000 kPa. The residual heat from the repurposed plutonium weapon core heated the 200-liter tank of water just behind his back. After launch, he would pull the separator rod, allowing the halves to come closer to each other. Hovering near critically, the nuclear steam reactor would provide 100 kilowatts of thrust and computer for 60 minutes. Then the water would run out. Counselor, it appears the suppression station number 1 has destroyed in a nuclear detonation. What? Roared Brax. How did they achieve nuclear launch, impact, and detonation without electricity? T-minus 60 seconds to launch, came the voice through the tube. Umbilical detachment underway. Steve simultaneously squeezed the control stick and tried to relax the rest of his body. He felt the airflow through the cramped cockpit quite to a distressing nothing as the air suddenly felt thick. The echoes from the voice tube cut out as he saw the cable gantry crawl away. Hand-riveted iron lurching under hydraulic pressure. Arcing from the suppression field, snapping miniature lightning between the gantry and the rocket as it detached. The field, as it was called, was, as far as they could tell, a continuous EMP generated by 2 alien platforms, orbiting opposite each other 500 kilometers up. The enormous current snapping through the ionosphere fried everything from computer chips to power lines. Somehow, even more distressing to the science teams, the effect penetrated Faraday cages. It was gravitational, somehow strong force nuclear. But the steam age tools, no one had been able to figure it out, so the problem was to be solved with violence. Sir, it appears the humans have launched a manned spacecraft into low orbit. The craft was armed. The tiny gyroscopic timer on the right side of the cockpit kept the countdown. The tiny window in front of him showed pure blue sky. The one above his head, he was on his back, showed a tower lurched to the halt. 5-second countdown, Colonel Brockton pulled the separator rod, and he could taste the plutonium grow white-hot. They said he might notice it, but the finality of those doses was discerning. Steam billowed out of the sides of the capsule portion, and a maniacal clicking dominated the cabin noise as the flight computer spun up. Handmade logic discs of beryllium, fused Seneca control rods only a few hairs thick, and a program tape of carbon fiber began to crunch his position on the second 16-bit computer created on Earth since the suppression. How did it get into space? How did it carry weapons? How did it guide the projectiles? Scans of the craft before destruction of the second station did not detect sufficient shielding to prevent electrical suppression. It seems that the humans launched the spacecraft with entirely mechanical means. The weapons, some sort of torpedo, did not alter course after launch. Why didn't the defenses shoot them down? We only detect projectiles in post-analysis due to their wake. They did not have any active guidance, and they were strongly absorbing to our active senses. Steve's teeth chattered violently under the thrust. The pogo oscillating from the untested rocket threatened to shake the entire thing apart as the clock approached time for Qmax, maximum dynamic pressure. Wild movements of the control stick with both hands directed high-pressure steam to the hydraulic steering converters. His eyes pegged on the steering target gimbal, controlled by the mechanical flight computer. "Come on, Daisy! Hold together!" Steve yelled at the computer as the backup gyro exploded from being forced off of its jewel bearing by vibrations. He winced as a piece of plastic, at least it's not glass, he thought, cut his cheek. But the computer held together. Slowly, the worst of the vibrations decayed as the viewport showed the blackness of space. A spring-loaded balance needle, a G-force meter, inched down past the blue line as the thrust of the solid rocket main stage burnt out. Steve reached down between his legs with both hands and pulled the red lever with both hands, and a faint smell of burnt gunpowder trickled his nose. Less than a second later, a loud bang shook the cockpit as the explosive bolt separated the main stage. The colonel folded his hands on his chest as the second stage lit, the G-forces pushing his eyes back into his skull. The G indicator pushed up above the red HG line for a few seconds as darkness crept in. The second stage thrust was higher than planned. Likely, the computer kept updating his course, and the 4 Gs he could reach the stick again and keep the pip on target. "What do you mean, wake?" "The torpedoes appeared to use nuclear fuel. Plutonium decayed products, as well as chlorine atomic spectra were detected. Our best guess is that they were nuclear saltwater rockets, and they achieved just over 50 Gs of acceleration." "Oh, curse the founders! They used mechanical nuclear devices!" Steve held the pip on target as the final thrust died down. The launch was timed to be on the horizon between the suppression stations to conceal as much as possible. He had 10 minutes to catch up. Clicking, hissing, whining, creaking, bobbling noises filled his ears. He pulled down the targeting periscope and turned the valve to deploy the weapon rails. A reassuring clunk and a tiny mechanical green flag indicated that both sights deployed. His eyes went back to the clock. At T plus 15 minutes, he double-checked his heading, still in the green, and peered into the eyepiece. The first flash was a second later, less than 1 degree off-center. Magnesium bombs were set off above the parabolic reflectors in the Arizona desert below to shine on the alien station like a giant flashlight. Once per second for 30 seconds. Steve gently muscled the control stick left, and high-pressure steam tilted the craft to line up with the crosshair on the target. Steve pulled the trigger and the stick and started counting backwards from 30 on each flash. 29, 28. Daisy screamed into high gear as the fire control computer gyros integrated target motion, platform motion, and simulated orbital trajectory. Steve watched the purely analog solution projection needle start to climb from 0 rapidly to 30, 40, 50. 5, 4, 3. The solution was above 95%. 1, 0. As the last flash from below made the tiny alien star blink far ahead of him, Steve pulled the second trigger, and the torpedo was away. "And what of the wreckage of the station?" "We assume the humans have salvaged it. The stator is over 10 years old." I was not aware of the delay. Why in Rylock's name happened?" "The priority header of the last dispatch was corrupted. It was automatically reflagged as no priority and wasn't discovered until an order 12 days ago." "Oh, no." It was impossible to see the impact directly due to the window angle. As the ship rotated away, to this point, but Steve's heart leapt as he saw the shadow from the flash. Holy crap, he thought. The timer ticked down until the second firing window. 30 minutes. His heart was pounding too hard for this. The stale cabin air pickled his sweat as the droplets beaded around his eyes. He cracked the oxygen bottle for a moment and relished a few seconds of cool air in the face. A messenger ran up to the scientist and counselor. Sirs, priority message from command. We have multiple unscheduled in-system jump signatures. Steve watched the gyro timer wind down to the last marking and peered through the scope again. Nothing. Still nothing. The flash array in China Highland should be firing by now. The fucking Chinese, goddamn fuckers, we should never trust. Plash. Oh, you beautiful sons of bitches, Steve shouted to no one. Steve pulled the valve to spin up the torpedo gyros. The gas pressure also popped out of the safety plug, keeping the uranium shells apart. The gun-type detonation mechanism was purely based on impact, so you wouldn't want it to collapse during its launch vibrations. The craft slewed sluggishly on target as he pulled the trigger, and Daisy sprung to life again. The firing solution craft quickly came up to 50% as the crosshairs tracked the tiny flashes. 20, 19, 19, come on! As the flashes stopped, he released the trigger as he avoided importing false starter as the target window swept slowly by. No, 18, finally, 17, 16, but then again it stopped at 5. Steve pulled the solution above 80%, but it would only started slowly descending. As the timer dinged the end of the illumination window, Steve prayed and pulled the firing trigger. Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnolds, Australia the Dreamer, Try Again 95, Pudic Yol, Meridian 117, Olivia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much.
And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways,
I'm not angry. Admiral Krath Draken stood up from his chair on the bridge of his flagship, looked around at his command staff that were all carrying out his orders, and sighed deeply. He took one more look at the display showing the size and makeup of the Varari fleet that was bearing down on them. His fleet was the last line of defense between the Varari and the homeworld of Chittar, and he knew that he was not going to be able to stop them. In just over 30 minutes, they would be in weapons range, and all the Krath could do was try and get as many non-combatants out of the line of fire as he could. With all that in mind, he turned to the human ambassador that had been standing by the door waiting for his attention. Mr. Adams, I do not know why you would come here at this time, but I will be commandeering your ship and loading it with as many of my people as it can accommodate for you to get out of this, He waved his claw vaguely at the tactical screen, showing the Varari fleet situation. Yes, Admiral, happy to help with that. In exactly 15 minutes you can have full command of my ship and do with it as you please, but, until then, can we talk? I was sent with some formal business that needs attending to. I do not know what formal business you might have with a man about to go down with his ship. But if you can talk while we walk to the medical bay, then so be it, replied the Admiral as he stalked out of the bridge door. Am I correct that you are the same Krath Draken that attended the welcoming ceremonies between Earth and Chittar all those years ago? Said the ambassador from just behind Krath as they walked down the corridor. Why, yes, I was. I may have been the most junior member of the Chittar delegation, but I was there. Ah, yes, good then. I believe you knew my grandfather, James Adams. That got Krath's attention. He slowed down his brisk walk and looked down at the ambassador. Oh, you're Jimmy's grandson, are you? 97 years ago, Earth, the Human Chittar Alliance ceremony. Lieutenant James Adams stood against the wall of the far back corner of the room. The diplomats giving the big speeches were so far away he couldn't tell one from another, just human or Chittar, and the general hum of the Chittar and the humans in the room masked even the audio. But that was fine. His only job today was to accompany his assigned Ch'tar and make sure nothing bad happened to him. First time at one of these, James said up to the Ch'tar, who at 8 feet towered over James's 6. Yes, came the reply. They are not very common. Finding a new neighbor this close to our borders was a surprise. Any farther away, and we would have just been simply trading partners, sir. You're so close, though, that getting formal diplomatic relations now will save us from issues later. We hope. Yourself, have you been to similar ceremonies before? Oh, no, said James. We have only had true interstellar flight for a handful of years now, and as far as I know, we have only directly met a few races other than the Ch'tar, and none of them seemed interested in more than being trading partners. Yes, well, the alliance gets tricky. That is why most races will only get involved with direct neighbors. I can send you a copy of The Fall of Azula Imperium after this. It details the fall of the last great galactic multicultural empire. Mostly dry reading, but it happened only a few hundred years ago, so it still lays heavy in the interspecies politics. My grandparents fought in some of those battles. That actually sounds quite interesting. After this, want to find a spot to sit and chat about it. James figured his babysitting job might be easier if the 8-foot-tall, skaty-skinned red behemoth wanted to sit down and chat. Yes, I cannot hear or see anything here anyways. Did I read in my briefing that you also consume ethyl alcohol for recreation? Inquired Krath casually. James smiled, despite himself. You know, I do believe the Officers' Club is inside our current security perimeter. They will have a fine selection for you to try. Maybe today wasn't going to be so bad after all. Does, your digital translator know the word karaoke? Current day. The Aegis, flagship for Admiral Krath's track and Ch'tar System Defense Force. As Krath led the way into the medbay, Ambassador Adams continued speaking. Admiral, the first thing I need to tell you is thank you. An entire generation of humans has been born and grown old, knowing the Ch'tar as friends. Living in a galaxy where that friendship has a shield over our whole race, protecting us from our more aggressive neighbors, and keeping the space lanes free from trouble with your large and powerful fleets. The Admiral scoffed. Ha! Not powerful enough. We had been at odds with the Virari for years, but had fallen into a nice stable standoff between equals. I don't know what changed in the last few months, but they are throwing 4 times more tonnage of ship into this war than we even thought they had. Our powerful fleets got swatted aside with almost no warning. So why, asked Mr. Adams, did you not ask us for help when things went sideways? Our alliance clearly states that we would come and help at any call. We owe you so much for all that you've done to us. Claxton sounds. 25 minutes until contact. All non-essential personnel are to evacuate immediately. Krath finished signing the medical discharge paperwork for all injured soldiers so that they could be evacuated as civilians. That might give them a chance at surviving another day. He turned towards the diplomat. After the first 2 engagements, those of us with access to the battle telemetry knew the outcome of the war. At this time, the Virari have had no reason to hate your people. If we had called you into this war and still lost, then we both would have fallen under the Virari thumb. As it is now, you have a chance. And in this universe, sometimes the best that we can offer is a chance. The same chance that I'm trying to give my people right now. Well, Admiral, then the second thing I need to tell you is that we're not just fighting the Virari. All of those extra ships, we investigated that also. And while they may look Virari, the metal in them has some distinct radiation signatures. Those ships were produced at a shipyard in a binary star system. But the Virari don't have any shipyards in a binary star system. Krath looked back over his shoulder towards the ambassador. They were at the armory where the Admiral was grabbing several sidearms to take back to the bridge with him. They had help. A third party supplied them as a proxy for this war. Yes, sir. We knew the Saurers had a massive shipyard in Syria system, the binary star system. Out of curiosity, we sent a scout ship to investigate, and saw the hulls of several more Varari ships in production. And while the Varari may not have a quarrel with humanity, the Saurers surely do, after the incident a few years ago. Klaxon sound. 20 minutes until contact. All non-essential personnel are to evacuate immediately. They were walking back onto the bridge. The Admiral sat back down in his chair. Be that as it may, Admiral, in the here and now, I need you to get your ship as far away from here as you can. Save as many people as possible for me. Saving as many of your people as possible is the plan, Admiral. But before I go, I need to say, we are sorry in your rendition of Take Me Home Country Roads. You left your datapad with my grandfather so he could transfer a book off from it while you sang. He also, transferred a cache from your military documents. Claxton sound. 15 minutes until contact. All non-essential personnel are to evacuate immediately. Lastly, we are sorry that we are so late. It took us some time to get everything ready. The whole ship rocked as the new gravity waves washed over it and the ship's systems started compensating. Red lights and sirens started blaring on the bridge. Massive warp fields entering the system, radiation signatures unknown. They are either really big or really fast, screamed the ensign over the alarms. A little bit of both, said the ambassador. Might I suggest you switch to a visual display of the Varari fleet? What in the true hell's is going on, Mr. Adams? Roared Admiral Krath-Draken as he leapt up from his chair. They're coming in, danger close and pushing extreme radiation, the ensign called out. Don't worry, my ship is feeding them telemetry. They know where they're going. With that, 4 massive oval ships of a design the Admiral had never seen before emerged from warp space between the two fleets. The new ships were carrying velocity directly towards the Varari. In front of each of the giant ship bows ran waves of orange radiation, burning through space hotter than a star, with all the built-up particle destruction they brought with them by driving engines while in warp space. Are you insane? Screamed the Admiral. That's Anuak radiation. Did you sacrifice the crews of those ships just for a chance at disabling some of the Varari ships? One of the plans my grandfather stole from you was for a missile that would push radiation ahead of itself to multiply its damage effect. It was too small, and the radiation was too chaotic. After many years of work, we found that if we built a properly shaped ship, we could control the direction of that radiation. And with some extra shielding technology, it was mostly harmless to the occupants of that ship. It does still take a frightening long time to build up, and its effective range is quite small. For the last 15 minutes, my ship has been given targeting telemetry to them while they were coming in on the final approach. As he finished, they all watched as the radiation waves rolled over the Varari fleet. Smaller ships were torn to shreds. Larger ships had their shields stripped right off of them. The whole fleet now was sitting duck for the tour of Dreadnought-class ships to rake with some standard pulse, fusion, laser, and kinetic weaponry. Engines still firing, they pushed right through the enemy fleet, disabling or destroying everything they targeted. It was a massacre. As I got clear on the other side, warp signatures re-emerged, and a few seconds later, the 4 massive ships were gone again. They have a date with the Varari Home Defense Network. You should clean up here and join them. We're hoping that you specifically, Admiral, and the Ch'tar in general, can take all the credit for this incident. We would rather not let word of our involvement get out. End of story.
I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Estrella the Dreamer, Try Again 95, Fury Giol, Meridian 117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksbaum, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. And as always, I hope that you enjoy.
Story 1. You Cannot Outrun Humans, written by the Caleb Mack. By the Void Mother's bowels! The profanity should have earned the vessel guide a swift yet pain-encouraged death. But given that the whole of the hive was now tumbling across the edge of the planetary gravity well and into an uncontrollable descent into atmosphere, the indiscretion was overlooked. Gravity waves still beat upon the hulls of the small hive fleet, the last survivors of what had been a grand and massive invasion force sent from the homeworld to conquer this arm of the galaxy, as so many had been sent before. At this time, the invasion had been blunted, stopped cold after only turning 3 worlds into Ford hives, and now each was lost. One turned into a glass ball with atmosphere of poison gas. Another was now nothing more than debris fields slowly turning into rings around another nearby planet. But the last, the demons actually took it back by force, with a speed and ferocity that was never before thought possible by any or all of the great mind queens. The demons arrived like a wave of seas smashing into one stranded in a storm. Weapons that spewed metallic rocks like a hailstorm, plasma like solar flares, and lines of light like red hellfire, burning twice as hot, swept the horde from the planet, nest by nest, nursery by feeding pod. So the hive ran. Yet the demons followed, swifter than reason, or just out of sense of range. Every time the hive fleet paused, the demonic humans followed close behind, and nothing seemed to stop them. Cripple one ship, 3 more took its place, tried to consume another. It would down a moon, but in the very void itself. Madness! We cannot stand that which refuses to die, which refuses to turn loose of us, refuses to let go. The Hive Queen was having a nightmare again. The Hive Queen was having a nightmare again. Her garbled cries of distress distant beneath the present. Stupid bug, muttered Jaxo as he went about cycling through the security feeds. You can't outrun humans. End of story. Story number 2. Cold Iron, written by Crumb J.D. Leave, Faye, I said, putting as much command into my voice as I could manage. The fairy turned towards me, and for a moment I was stunned. Every part of him was perfect. Every feature was utterly ideal. Every line of his body just as it should be. Every hair in place. I wanted to drop my sword and swear service to him just so that I could follow him wherever he went and be forever in his presence. Instead, I twisted my sword such as the icy pommel met the small patch of bare skin between my glove and my coat. The push of glamour against my senses retreated somewhat, and I was able to growl out my command a second time. Leave! I won't, the fairy said in his fine, musical voice. I have need of a child, and I haven't taken one yet. They glanced up, and the fire escaped above the creature. Apparently, he intended to jump onto that, and then climb up to some apartment and snatch a baby. The fairy held the sack, and now that I knew what to look for, I could see the outlines of an infant, but still and unmoving, an inactive changeling. And I won't allow it. I took a step forward, moving my sword into a guard position.